guys in the dark.
I'm wary of car dealerships because about 5 years ago, at one, my identity was stolen by the car salesman himself. After LAPD's initial refusal to do anything, they considered it a civil offense and not a criminal one at first, even if he was using my identity to rent an apartment in a luxury building next to the car dealership. He was arrested, convicted, served prison time, and then he skipped parole and escaped to Nigeria. He is now officially a fugitive, though he is on Facebook. The dealership's attorney had sent me threatening letters, advising me not to tell anyone, lest I cross the line to libel or slander. I never heard from the dealership itself on the matter. Not even an apology was sent to me. And I know now that the dealership lies to customers and says that it never happened, even though there are public records about it. Conviction records, police reports, and court reports. No civil attorney wanted the case, as it was too much work to sue them, since I didn't have a slip and fall, and only identity theft would happen. Then about 2 years ago, after a long year personally and professionally, I decided to treat myself to a luxury car. I decided on a Range Rover, and knew that the color combination and model that I wanted, and I had test-driven one a few months prior. I searched all the Los Angeles area Land Rover dealerships. I found one dealership that had the car that I happened to want. Over the course of a couple of days, I haggled out the purchase price via an email, text message, and phone calls, with everything documented. I told them that I would come in, pay for the car directly in cash, with perhaps a bit of financing if I decided to. We haggle a firm price for the exact VIN number, so I go in to pay. The dealership tells me that they just sold the car. They were quite earnest about it. They told me that they would get the one that I wanted from another dealership. 2 months happened to go by, and there is no other car, so I looked at their website and found my number 2 choice. Slightly more expensive, but it was acceptable. And I did the process all over again, in writing and documented. And I go in again to pay, and this time, a different salesman gives me the "we just sold it" speech. The problem was, it was the exact same words, tone, delivery, and physical delivery as the last time I went in. I have worked in Hollywood for 20 years, and know when people are acting, and performances are scripted. And to get the same performance from 2 different people, 2 months from each other, something is rotten in Denmark. I left once again, angry as they tried to sell me a car that cost $8,000 more than the one that I had negotiated so far. So I gathered my notes and the VIN numbers for the just sold cars. I had a friend of mine that happened to be in law enforcement run the VINs, and it turns out the cars were sold months before the dealership negotiated their sales price to me. The dealership was advertising cars for sale that they did not have anymore. So I presented the evidence to the dealership. At first, the sales director explicitly called me a liar. I then gave the exact transaction dates and negotiated evidence, and informed them that selling something you do not have a claim to is fraud. I also told them that I was going to make an attorney general's complaint for fraudulent practices against the dealership, as this was clearly a pre-planned move. I ended up getting concessions from them to build a 2013 Land Rover model at a very great price. Truth be told, the sales manager at the 0 hour reneged on the written deal, even then, and added a few $100s to the final price. But it was still way under market, and as much as I despised the process, the people, and the dealership, I really wanted that car. So I went to go pay for it. They gave me the car, and oriented in record time. I was in and out of the dealership in perhaps 20 minutes, flat. And from the time I drove away, I have never heard or even gotten a single follow-up call or email from them. Clearly they wanted me out of their lives, and I wanted them out of mine for sure. I just wanted the car that I wanted. I got it at a great price, and I will never even drive past their dealership again, as without leverage, they cannot be dealt with. And not even then, they won't be honest with you. I suppose that I will tell my story about a car dealership in Connecticut. I saw a fairly priced '02 WRX in silver on their ad. I called them the very next day. They assured me that it was there, and of course I showed up. He brings me to a regular Impreza, to which I said no thank you, and I leave. Fine, no big deal. 10 minutes driving to that shithole town isn't the end of the world, right? About a week later, after ignoring several phone calls, I finally answer one from a man saying, "Why didn't you show up?" I said that I did. You tried to bait and switch me, which I did not appreciate. And now you are calling me after the fact, trying to do the same thing once again. To which he had responded, rather harshly, "We do have the car. You don't know what you're talking about." From there I explained the difference between a WRX and an Impreza, being pretty large, and not a surprising response. "I have all your information on file. I'll come to your house right now, you little rotten bitch. You think that you can fuck with me? I'll fuck you up." 4 months go by. My girlfriend's grandmother pulls up in a Mazda minivan with a sticker from the dealer on the back, and I think, well, fuck. I used to be a master tech at a Mercedes-Benz dealer in one of the priciest zip codes in the United States. A CL600 with a few thousand miles comes in with a set of leaky valve covers. No big deal. It was a common problem on the V12s for a while. We had a lube tech that was being groomed to step his game up for the big leagues. As you can probably guess, the dealer had the lube tech attempt the repair. Here's what happened to go down. Changing these V12 valve cover gaskets was one of his first big jobs. It was time-consuming, but very straightforward. Unfortunately, it was impossible to do without getting a lot of oil all over the turbo's exhaust manifolds. To look good or save time, this kid was two-fisting cans of brake cleaner to get things cleaned. Perfectly okay to do. On a cold engine that's not running, that is. Unfortunately, these engines make a ton of exhaust heat, even at idle while running, for emission reasons. Next thing we know, there's an engine fire that burned the car completely to the ground. The dealership tried to get the guy into another vehicle, but he refused. He wanted his car, and the dealership didn't happen to have his car in stock. I don't really know what happened afterwards, but that poor guy was definitely pissed off at our mechanic. I went to an auto auction, and when I arrived, everyone was bidding on a pristine-looking Acura TL. I figured the car looked pretty clean. People were raising their bids, so it had to be a good car. Long story short, I won the auction. After completing the paperwork and getting the title and keys, I had the car towed home. But when I got in and turned the ignition, it wouldn't start. I opened up the hood to see what I could find. The problem was instantly clear. There was nothing under the hood. There was no engine, no transmission, no radiator, no battery. I contacted the auction, who explained that the car was sold as is. Fortunately, soon after I met a guy with the same car that had a good engine, but a bad body. We transferred in the drivetrain, and the car ran just fine. It definitely could have been a lot worse. I have been to many dealerships, and this is my favorite story out of all of them though. A would-be customer who called in complaining that his new vehicle wouldn't run in night mode. I was confused. I restated what he had just said, assuming that I happened to misheard him. He insisted again. When I put it in day mode, there happens to be no problem. I drive forward immediately. But in night mode, I can't get it to move at all. It just sits there. It still turns on the same, and I can hear the engine get louder and louder when I push on the pedal. But it just won't move at all. That is when it clicked in. "Sir, are you referring to when you shift the stick, and the stick is next to the N symbol? Is that when you happen to have the problem?" He immediately confirmed, "Yes, like I said before, in night mode. This piece of shit doesn't work. I can never drive at night." I couldn't find the words to politely tell this gentleman that D and N meant drive in neutral, not day and night. I had to have the assistant manager take over for me because I couldn't hold back from laughing at the guy. Now I realize that it is actually a terrifying story, because that guy is actually somewhere out there in the world driving, thinking there happened to be a day and night mode on vehicles. I really can only imagine how bad this dude drives.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.